What's up, people? Welcome back to another episode of Stars and Garters. I'm Katie Pettit, and for today's Marvel Monday, I thought that I don't do as many of these videos as I do talking about the MCU because most people care and know about, or at least know about the MCU and are familiar with that. But I really enjoy talking about comics. I do love comics. I would honestly rather read like a Marvel comic than watch a Marvel movie. Um, so I want to talk about comics this time, and I'm not going to like review a comic series or talk about a character's journey in the comics like I've done before. I am going to look at a specific issue that is starting to creep into like the movies and stuff because they are based on the comics, but it has been an issue with the comics for like way longer and way more like persistent in the comics, so I will be mostly focusing on that. But so one of the biggest complaints from people who don't care for the superhero genre in general, and people who do like it, one of the biggest complaints about this genre is that there are no big stakes for the character. Even if they're fighting on galactic scales, the whole world is gonna end. Even if it's like that scale of like an enemy or a battle, there's not personal stakes in it because no one stays dead. So yeah, this has been this has been pointed out by millions of people. Anyone who has been remotely involved in or seen superhero genre stuff, whether it's comics or movies, you see the complaint just so much that it's like, what does it matter? Like, this character is dead. You know they're just gonna bring him back in some way. And they're honestly not wrong. I will defend a lot of things about the superhero genre, but this is not, they're definitely not incorrect. It's happened so many times. Like, characters die and come back to life just so often in the newest X-Men era of comics called, or the not the newest, but the one that came before the most recent one. It was called the Krakoan era, and they literally, so like the mutants are kind of, they have their own island now and they have their own little society, and they have this thing called resurrection protocols where they can literally resurrect any mutant immediately after they die. So it's stuff like that that kind of goes like, oh well, why do I care then? And it's like, you kind of shouldn't. That's like, it's not a good decision. It's not good storytelling, in my opinion. So, I will be looking at examples of bad deaths, a few specific deaths that were just not deaths, and the resurrections that came with those deaths that just felt bad and pointless and not good, and seeing why it's just such a annoying thing, and also seeing how maybe you could have fixed that and how it should have played out. And then I will be looking at an example of a good example of a character dying and then coming back to life, which, because I think that can be used to be a really well done thing, but it has to be done like super sparingly and in the right way. So I'll be getting into that later, but let's first talk about Marvel doing just not doing good with these deaths. So characters like Wolverine, Captain America, Hawkeye, and Professor X. I included Hawkeye just for fun because I specifically read a comic where he died. I know he's not as important as the other three, but nonetheless, they have all died probably more than once. I would almost like bet, but I'm pretty sure, maybe aside from Hawkeye, but I'm pretty sure these have all had like events, comic events about their death. Uh, and then they, of course, came back. So the thing about these resurrections being so bad right now is because, like, the death of a character in a franchise is supposed to hit really hard for readers and the characters in the book. It's supposed to make us feel super sad and get more invested in it. It's supposed to make the characters around them have to deal with that loss, maybe be affected by it, maybe just all these things can happen from that, but that doesn't get to happen, especially for the readers. It doesn't get to happen because we're all like, okay, they died, guess they're coming back in the next issue. And it doesn't get to happen for the characters because you can tell, like, they just don't put as much, like, grief and effects of this death into their writing with the characters if they know that they're gonna bring the character back, because they don't have to. There's no reason for there to be any effect of this, because they're like, oh, I'm gonna bring them back, I don't really have to make these characters grieve, because that would be unnecessary. But the so that's why that's the main reason behind why it's so annoying, because like the death of a character is supposed to be a big deal in any kind of media, and knowing that they could come back is already a little like, oh, they might come back, but knowing almost certainly that they will just takes all of that away from what's supposed to be this super important moment. So the thing about, so like when Wolverine, Cap, or Professor X, when they died, the comics where they died were usually good comics. When they're big events, they're usually actually pretty good because they act like it's going to be this huge world changing thing. Like, this person is dead, we're making this whole event about it, and they're going to die, and it's going to affect things. And usually, that comic, if you just read it by itself, is actually a pretty solid comic, because those, when they make a big deal out of it, when it's a big character, they usually do write it well. They make these characters be super affected. It's like so shocking, and they like usually die in a way that makes sense for them. I think I can't remember exactly how Wolverine died most recently, but I was reading some comics where he was still dead, and they're like solid comics. They get these characters close to him or like dealing with his death. There's a comic series. I only have 2 of the books, and I want to get the rest, but it's called Wolverines, and it's just like his closest allies and even enemies, like getting together and have to deal with the aftermath, yeah, of his death, and it's pretty solid comic. So but like all throughout it, you just kind of have this bad taste in your mouth because you're like, he's coming back, and all of this is going to be completely meaningless because he'll just come back and fix it, everything. And one personal problem I have, especially with Wolverine and Cap, and kind of even it's different with Professor X, but it's very similar. Is that I have a special place in my heart for legacy heroes. So, if you don't know, if you're a noob, that is a character who will take on the uh, like previous holders' mantle. So, like Sam Wilson took the Captain America mantle. He would be a legacy character. It doesn't necessarily have to be like they're related to them or even known them before. It's just a character that takes on the mantle of an older character. So I really do like the idea of legacy characters, but the like I understand sometimes why my dad doesn't like them, and I understand why anybody would not like them, because they would just be made so many more times better if they would like let their predecessors die, because it's like with Wolverine, while he was dead, X-23 became the new Wolverine, and that's I really love that series, because she is having to deal with taking on this big responsibility, and not like him being there to tell her how to do it, and it's just like she is the new Wolverine, and she's figuring this out, and she has to deal with his death all throughout this, and it's really done well. But then when Wolverine came back, she couldn't be Wolverine. They still had her be Wolverine, but it just feels wrong. It feels weird because there shouldn't be 2 Wolverines, and you had this really great story lined up for her, after her dad died, and she's taking up his mantle and has to deal with all this stuff. But now that he's back, like basically all of that is meaningless. And it's the same for like Cap, because with him you have Bucky and Sam coming up and taking on his mantle, and they're they could get these really nice arcs and stories with that, but Cap comes back, and everyone knows that like Cap is Cap, and like it's like Steve Rogers is Captain America, and everybody knows that, and like I think that's probably why it's even harder to accept a new like it's harder to accept legacy characters because you know that Steve Rogers is Cap, and you know that he's going to come back and be Cap. Like you don't, there's no need to replace him if you know he's coming back. So it's also very bad. It's not only bad for like the readers and just enjoying the story, it's also bad for new characters and legacy characters and getting people to care about your characters when this cannot have any effect on them in the end. So, one specific example of a bad death that I would like to point to in Marvel Comics, one that particularly hits for me, is that of X-23. Or Talon. She died with the codename Talon, so I guess we can refer to her as that. So, the X-23 that I know, she died recently in the Krakoan era. She died in a way that made sense for her. It was good. It was a good way to die. The problem with her death is that before she actually died, the X-Men thought she was dead. So, because of their resurrection protocols, they made another her. They made a clone of her, which is another problem with the resurrection protocols. Every resurrection is just making a clone of them and then imprinting their memories onto that clone, which is problematic in a lot of ways. I don't know if I really have time to get entirely into it. But so they made a clone of X-23 when they thought she was dead, and then she turned out to be alive from that part. It wasn't like they weren't trying to kill her off. It was like we knew she was alive, but the X-Men didn't. So they made this clone of her, and then she comes out and turns out to be alive. And so for a minute there were two Laura Kinneys walking around. The real one, the original, was going as Talon, and she let the clone have the Wolverine mantle. So after we focused on Talon going and she did her whole thing and then she ended up dying, that is the end of Laura Kinney to me. That is her story wrapped up. But instead of letting her death have any effect whatsoever, there's literally another Laura Kinney. It's like it's worse for me than any of the other ones because it's not like they're coming back. It's not like, oh, they're just coming. It's like she is dead and she's not coming back, but there's literally another her that we're supposed to just let have her story now and do all these things and be like the new X-23, and it sucks. It sucks so bad because there's a literal clone of herself that is using her name. Her name is Laura Kinney. If you would have given her a different name even, I would have been a little less upset about this. But using the name Laura Kinney and just being like, it's like she never died. It's not even like she died and then was annoyingly resurrected. It's like her death never even happened. This is the least a death probably has ever mattered. And that might be a little exaggerated. But for me, it's just like, it does not matter. Like, the way that she died and the way that whole story went, that was good enough for me. I was like, close it off. That's good. I mean, obviously, I love her character, but like, if you give her a good story and that's how she dies, then that's great. Like, that completes her arc. That's fine with me. It's like Tony in the MCU. But instead, you are just going to pretend like it literally never happened and just not make it matter at all. So I was reminded of this because I recently was looking at all the new comics that Marvel is releasing like this month or something, and there's an X-23 series, or it might be called Wolverine, I'm not sure, but it's not her. It's like, it's an X-23 story, it's Laura Kinney, and it looks like she just never even died, but I know that it's not her. It's literally a different person who was just decided to pick up where she left off completely, and it's so annoying. So in this situation, like, it just would have been so much better if she had stayed dead, because with this, like, she wasn't. So we have a Wolverine now, so nobody would have been able to take her Wolverine mantle, which would have been cool, honestly, if you had let Logan die in the first place, and then Laura die, and then have another person come up as Wolverine. But Logan's alive, so that was pointless. But X-23 has Gabby, and she's not a particularly popular character, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you could have given her, help her, like, given her a chance to step into the spotlight, because her, like, the character that she was closest to, her sister, is dead, and so now she has to kind of deal with that and step into the spotlight and follow in her sister's footsteps, and she would have gotten this opportunity to be like a much bigger hero and kind of take her place, but not in a way that's literally just replacing her and going on like our death never happened, in a way that would have had to deal with her death and be affected by it and learn from it and all of these things, and it would have made it so much better. And I hate that they didn't do that, because, like, just thinking of it, it would have been the perfect place for Gabby to get a moment. Like, not honestly, new comics are just rough right now, so I don't even know if I would have wanted them to deal with Gabby, and because they probably would have done something stupid with her too. But I'm saying, like, in the perfect comic world where they are still doing good. They would have been able to give Gabby her own story, made her a big, like, a more important character, because the death would have had the biggest effect on her, and it would have been an important death, and that would have given Gabby the opportunity to be an important character, because she was connected to this important death, and she would have been able to come up and maybe take on the Talon mantle. I mean, I'm not saying that she should, I'm just saying that it would just be so much more meaningful if they had just let that happen. For me, that X-23, the Laura that is in almost every single one of those comics on my bookshelf over there, is dead, and her story is complete. I'm like, this headcanon, this new Laura does not exist. Yeah, I don't, I'm not going to, I'm, like, just gonna pretend they didn't ever make her happen, because it's so annoying, and I'm very upset about it. But so that one, she's dead, and her story is complete, and it was a good story, and there is no new Laura Kinney. So yeah, but if they could have if that was actual canon, because unfortunately headcanons are not reality. Uh, they could have gone with it and made something really good and made a lot of good stories come for this, because it would have affected Gabby and, I guess, Logan. But in this perfect comic universe, in my head canon, Logan is also dead. But just it would have been so much better. It could have been so much better if they had just not been stupid and done stupid stuff. So now I'm going to move on, and so if you have to do a resurrection, which my personal opinion is, just don't, like, just let characters die and have an effect and let them just stay dead, like, forever. Like, if you're gonna make a new comic about them, make it be in the past. Black Widow, it's MCU, but, like, just, like, let them be dead. If you want to make a comic about them in the past, that's honestly fine, but let them be dead and let them live on through characters being affected by their death. You don't have to make them come back to life for them to matter to comics anymore. Like, if they're an important enough character, they'll just live on, you know? To say it dramatically. But so the ideal situation is just don't bring characters back ever. I know that that's not happening but that would be ideal. But if you must do a resurrection, I have an example that I think uh, is a good resurrection. It's like the only one. So, interestingly enough, it is not from Marvel. Because, to my knowledge, it just hasn't happened where Marvel has done a good, like, resurrection story. So, I think that Marvel needs to take a page out of DC's book, because there is one character who has died and come back to life, but his death actually was impactful still, and then his resurrection story was actually good. So, I am referring to that of Jason Todd. He was the second Robin after Dick was fired and became Nightwing, and he was murdered by the Joker, aka the DC fans, because they called in and they voted for DC to kill him off. So they did. He was beaten to death with a crowbar by the Joker, and Batman considered him his greatest failure. But after a couple years of him being dead, he was put into the Lazarus Pit by somebody, I don't actually know who, but his body was resurrected, and he was with the Court of Owls or the League of Assassins or something. Don't know exactly where he went from there. But then he was his resurrected self with not I'm not exactly sure how the Lazarus did work. But his resurrected self, who was pretty much completely different and not his old self, became a Batman villain, and then Batman was able to get to him and remind him of who he was, and he came into this new persona where called the Red Hood, where he was still affected by his death and by his resurrection and by all of that stuff. So, why I think this is an example of a good death is, first thing, it remained canon for a long time, not super long, but a good amount of time. I'm not exactly sure the number of years that Jason remained dead, but it was allowed to have a very important, real impact on the characters around him, especially Batman. It has, he to this day still considers it his greatest failure, because he wasn't coming back is the big thing. It's Jason is dead, and he is that's it, and he remained dead, he was dead. It was an older comic, so he was just dead, and that. Jason was dead, and so Batman considered it his biggest failure. And since he remained dead, that they lasted for an amount of time that it had a real effect on Batman. It's it was as if he died like a normal person. It was able to have an effect because he didn't come back. There was no sign of him coming back. But secondly, when he did come back, he had been gone long enough for the trauma to have an effect on his friends, and also when he came back, it was able to have an effect on him as a character, because they didn't just it's not how the Lazarus Pit works, but they didn't just have him come back into Batman's life as Robin and be like, I'm back, it's all okay. He came back and was super screwed up from dying. He was not reunited with Batman instantly. He came back super jaded and just absolutely tormented by everything that happened. He was trained by assassins and started killing people all the time, just left and right, and became a Batman villain. But he was eventually turned back into a good guy, but he has so much trauma now, which is super good for character. We love trauma. Trauma is super fun as a reader. Love some trauma. If it's done well and not just overused and stereotypical and boring. But his trauma is deep because it's from dying. And it's from dying and just being dead for years and years, and he has trauma from being dead and then being resurrected and then being trained as a completely different person and then fighting his old family and then having to come back from that. bro has issues, and that's good. We like that as a reader. We want the people to have the issues, and he does, and it was able to have like lasting real effects on Batman, on him, on Dick and Barbara and Alfred. Everybody was affected by this, and then when he came back, he was affected by it too, because they let him be dead for a long time, and then they made it still matter even when he was alive. And it was able to do that because he had been dead for a long time. So, what I'm saying about Jason, is that if you absolutely think it is a good idea to resurrect this character, and at this point, if you're gonna do it, like, nobody's gonna believe you. If you try to do a Jason Todd, nobody's really gonna care, because they're gonna be like, he's gonna come back in the next couple of issues. Even if you wait for a long time, I think it will be hard to get the reader's trust back. But in my perfect comic book world that exists in my brain, if you have to bring back a character, and assuming the reader still trusts you, the way to do it would be to do a Jason Todd. Be to kill him in a meaningful way, in a way that makes sense for the character, obviously, but then to just not to leave it for years, like actual years in this universe, not in your comics universe, like actual years. Leave him dead. Have characters grieve, have characters get their brains screwed up by this death, make it matter, and then bring him back, but not immediately back into like where they were as before they died. Like make them have to deal with dying and have trauma from it, and make it have an effect on the character that was resurrected, because now you've already done good with the other characters, the characters around them, they've been affected. Now don't just make this character like be okay and be their normal self, like make them be affected by their own death if you have to bring them back. So that is literally the only example I can think of like a solid way to kill off a character and then bring them back. I can't think of a Marvel example. My dad might know one, but I don't even think he likes the Jason Todd example, so shrug, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that since we are talking about Marvel mostly, DC is almost just as guilty of this, but so Marvel needs to take exactly one page out of DC's book, not any more pages, because DC does the same thing sometimes. So only the Jason Todd page, just take that and then close the book and throw it away over there. Not that all of it's bad, I'm just saying, like, this is the only thing that, about the death thing, that DC has done better than Marvel, I guess. So Marvel just needs to take that page, the Jason Todd page, if they really want to keep resurrecting characters, then do that, and do it like the Jason Todd way, and it could be really good. But in the end, mostly what they need to do is just let the characters die. Like, let them stay dead. Don't touch their dead body anymore. Just let it stay in the ground and rot and decompose naturally, so that the other characters have to deal with that. Have to deal with the fact that they are dead and their body is rotting in the ground, and it will never come back. And just make that affect the universe. Their story, that character story, will have a good ending as long as you like kill them off in a way that makes sense. The story will be able to have a satisfying conclusion with that character. The legacy heroes behind that character can step up and become characters that we care about, because the character that just died that we cared about was connected to them. So now they can step up, and other characters around them can be affected and can grow as characters and have that added to their character and be a very good way to grow characters. So, yeah, in conclusion, Marvel, let people die. I'm talking to Marvel Comics. Honestly, I have a lot to say to Marvel Comics, but this is like one of the biggest and more known issues, even for people who like just watch the movies. They're already starting to see it kind of happen. Like, it's creeping in there, but Marvel, let people die. Let them die, and let them stay dead. Don't just let them stay dead. Just don't bring them back. It's not necessary. I don't know why it became such a thing. Like, I don't like, did it even start off being received well? I genuinely don't know. But it's gotten away from you, and you need to get it back, and you need to just be like, okay, we need to start making character deaths matter. Because, newsflash, Marvel, everywhere else, they matter. They really matter. And, like, there are, like, iconic deaths and stuff like that from a bunch of other franchises. And you know why they're so iconic and yours are not so? Because they stay dead, and we don't have to worry about them coming back. Now, I will say I'll give Marvel a little bit of wiggle room because comics are, like, ongoing a lot more than, like, any other franchise. And I understand, like, a lot of franchises have to be kind of always ongoing, but it's comics is different. It's like you are putting out a comic that is in the same universe with thousands of characters and stories like that, like every month, like just, and it's crazy, and I understand that, but I understand they're different. Just you can't have that as an excuse for bad storytelling. So just let them die. Let them be dead. Also fix other things, but we're not talking about that right now, and I haven't completely gotten my thoughts around those topics as much as this one, but I know that you need to stop killing characters. No, you need to stop killing characters and bringing them back. Honestly, at this point, maybe stopping killing characters for now would be the best course of action. But this is just my advice and my opinion. And I know nobody from Marvel is listening, so if you guys out there know anybody at Marvel, just show them this. Do me a favor. And I'm pretty sure that it would fix the whole comic book industry. I could be wrong about that, but it seems like that would be the logical course of action. So if you've got connections to Marvel, just, hook me up. It'll be good. So, yeah, that's it. That is the conclusion. Thank you for listening to this rant. Make sure to share it with your friends and Marvel Comics. Make sure to comment about, I don't know. I don't really, since Spotify doesn't have questions, I just let you say whatever, but you don't ever say anything, so say stuff. Make sure to follow and subscribe, definitely. 100th episode's coming up, 2 more episodes. Well, 1 more episode. I don't know how to say that correctly, but more episodes. There's a small amount of episodes that are coming up until the 100th episode. I'm trying to get something cool together. I might have to tweak some stuff, but I'm trying to do something pretty cool. So just keep your eyes open for that. And even if it turns out to not be as cool as I hoped, still thank you for watching through 100 episodes. It's pretty sweet. So, see you. Bye.